I've never posted about my experiences before, but I was reading a Greentext that reminded me of an encounter I had recently. I figured it was enough of an excuse to open a thread for others to share their experiences too. Enjoy. Be me, mindlessly shambling through Walmart one afternoon. Absolutely spaced out, not in this world, lost in thought. Think about Dad. Think about his friends. Think about Father's friend, Dave. Haven't seen Dave in years. Run cart into another person's cart at the intersection of arts and crafts.
Oh God, I'm so sorry.
It's Dave, and he looks horrifying, like a dead man walking. Shit snapped me back to reality fast.
Oh, hi Dave. Been a while. Didn't strike you as the kind of shop for art supplies.
He just stands there without a word, staring blankly at me the whole time, eyes wide. His skin was dry and paler than I know it should be. His lips were cracked and his eyes were bloodshot. It was like looking at a crackhead's mugshot or an acid attack victim. Pick related. He was scarred similarly. Keep trying to make small talk, but to no avail. He's a fucking statue.
Well, I better keep moving, Dave. It was good to see you. Yeah, it was good seeing you too, Anon. I better get going.
He fucking spoke. Even flashed me a smile and a stiff wave. His teeth looked filthy. Thank God I couldn't catch his breath. Sounded like what I remembered Dave sounded like, but raspier. Like someone who hadn't had a sip of water in days. Kept moving like nothing was out of place, but internally, I had escalated to DEFCON 2. The rest of my shopping went fine. Went home, put shit up, went over to my father's home.
Hey Dad, guess who I ran into today? Dave. You remember Dave?
Dad puts his beer down and his cigarette down in the ashtray I bought him for Father's Day a few years back. Looks me in the eye and goes,
You're kidding me. The obituary section in the paper said he died Tuesday evening. You must be mistaken.
Inspect newspaper. Sure enough, Dave had died. I was in disbelief. I knew he had gone down a dark path in recent years, but I never imagined he'd go the way he did. Laziness claimed his work opportunities, and from what I knew then, he pretty much drank and smoked all the time. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I reactivated my dead Facebook and reached out to his kids when I got home. Each of them had more or less the same to say. He was a deadbeat. He was always degrading and undermining our confidence. He was not a good father, etc. Learned from his daughter that he had been in some sort of accident prior to his passing that had left him facially damaged and scarred. My face one, I spoke to a dead man walking. Tell her I ran into him at Walmart. She's in disbelief. Tells me it's not funny to make up sick jokes, especially with the deceased having passed so recently. Threatens that her brother is coming for me. Plot twist? He doesn't. Tell the oldest brother about it. We'll call him Bill. He believes me. Gives me his phone number and tells me to call him that evening. Do so. Tells me about a call he apparently had the night his father passed. Received phone call from his father. Apparently, his voice sounded similar to what I described to Bill. Raspy. Off.
Hey Bill, I'm awful sorry I wasn't accepting of you as a kid. You're a good person, regardless of the fact that you like men. I love you, son.
That's more or less what I was relayed. Hung up without another word. Dave to the grave, always gave the oldest shit for being gay and doing theater.
I believe you, Anon. I know my sister is just aching right now. It's a hard loss for all of us, despite everything.
Chat with Bill for a bit longer before hanging up. The next day, I go back to my father's place and catch him up to speed. He's quiet for most of the rundown, though, as I went on, I could tell all I was doing was making him sad. Drop the topic.
You know, Anon, he wasn't always an asshole.
For context, my father's friends and associates have been dropping like flies since 2019. Needless to say, he doesn't have very many friends these days. Even though Dave had really cut ties with my father, he still wished the man all the best. I think even now he longs for his friendship.
He turned out some good kids, though.
For a dead man? Maybe Dad?
You really saw him at the arts and crafts aisle? Yeah, Dad. Why? He always said only women and fairies shopped in that aisle.
Laughreel.wav. My face when Dave went to make his peace with the arts and crafts aisle before passing and bumped into me. Don't know why he was pushing a shopping cart though, since he's dead and all. My grandpa would never go in his attic. Would never tell us why. Me and siblings grew up not really questioning it. All of us just knew that Pop wouldn't go in the attic. Whenever he needed something from it, we'd go get it for him. Totally normal attic. Never got any spooky vibes from it. Years later, Grandpa dies. Died peacefully in his sleep. I go stay with my grandma to keep her company. One night, we're up late talking about old memories. I bring up the attic and a story. Grandma gets really quiet. Asks if anyone ever talked to me about why he wouldn't go up there. Nope.jpg. She tells me that when they first moved into the house, Pop couldn't sleep. He said something about the house just didn't feel right. He paced all night like he was crazy. Went over every inch of the house with a fine-toothed comb. Grandma is really worried but doesn't say anything. One night, he goes up into the attic. She hears him start screaming. She sprints up the attic and finds him curled up in a ball. He's sobbing. Grandma asks them what happened. He looks up at her and tells her he figured it out. He points to where the eaves of the roof narrow down towards the far end. She looks. There's nothing there. Then, she looks closer and sees something she can't really describe or explain. All she could compare it to was origami. It was like space was folded up on itself. The angles were all wrong. She said that when she looked at it, she could feel herself going crazy, like something inside of her was melting. She drags Pop down the stairs and puts him to bed. He sleeps for 2 days. When he wakes up, he says he'll never go into the attic again, as long as he lives. Never says another word about it. Ignores Grandma when she brings it up. Grandma goes quiet and I don't say anything. We moved on to other stuff and she hasn't brought it up again since. Turns out most of my family knows. That part of the attic has always been blocked with a huge old bureau. Now I know why. Now, I had a very good friend who I'll call Sherlock, because he believed very much in similar philosophies to Sherlock, as in deductive reasoning, the purity of a priori logic. I've heard him over the radio when he's being shot at and having RPGs fired at him, and he sounded as calm and relaxed as somebody on holiday in an ice cream shop specifying what flavor they wanted. For example,
Cucumber Crisp 071. I'm under fairly heavily sustained fire. It looks like part of my fuselage just gave way. Over.
That sort of thing. I'm fairly sure he was slightly autistic because he'd just wait until base told him to pull out or whatever. He also had no mercy. If he had authorization to fire, he'd light them up. No qualms, no limitations. Anyway, I've seen Sherlock quake like a fucking leaf in the winter wind. It must have been around 3 AM and there was fuck all to do. I was playing poker against the computer and winning. Another friend of mine was reading Kant on my bed when he walked into my room. Pretty unusual because he always knocked. He'd delivered some supplies to an outpost about 70 kilometers away from the main base. Not deep in hostile territory, but hostile enough that you'd expect an RPG or two when you supplied them, or took out the wounded, which is mainly what Sherlock did, even volunteering to do it. He'd sat down in the afternoon and helped unload some supplies, mainly medical, ammunition, and tools, and stuck around taking requests from the CEO who was running low on water and water purification tablets. A few privates were on duty in the dusk, and one of them freaked, saying he could see something through the thermals that he couldn't see in person. This piqued Sherlock's curiosity, so he had to look. Sure enough, when he looked through thermals, he could see the shape of a man about 200 meters down the path, but looking with binoculars, couldn't see anything, even with night vision. This is quite common in Afghanistan. It's reported uncommonly. Despite this being an uncommon event, it's always quite unnerving when it happens. But according to Sherlock, he wasn't unnerved, just his deductive reasoning pricking up. First, he thought the thermals were dodgy, so he used another set. Then another set. Then he thought the binoculars were bad, so he used another pair, which weren't just thermal imaging, but infrared night vision. Rather than a shitty green tinted type, it was a grayscale type, which showed significant detail. Now, on the infrared grayscale, he could see it. Apparently, it was a human in everything other than having a head. The body was human, perfectly proportioned, but there was no head. Now, the other night vision didn't show this. Sherlock, armed with nothing other than our standard issue Browning high power and probably just a single magazine, strolled 200 meters down the path to see if he could see anything. Apparently not, though he said it felt unusually chilly and he did feel quite uneasy. It was on his way back when he heard soldiers shouting. Looking behind him, he saw 4 or 5 putrefied bodies shambling after him. He described the smell as rancid and their look as if they had contracted the vilest leprosy. They were moving pretty quickly, and he could see body parts, fingers, hands, even an entire arm drop off. When he said they were like the Walking Dead, I felt a chill go up my spine. My friend reading Kant actually looked up at us. Sherlock said he shouted a warning to the bodies, apparently rotting as if dead for a few days, appendages and torso swollen from the sun, and as they continued to gain ground on him, begun opening fire. Despite one of them being hit several times, losing most of its shoulder and through the stomach, it single-mindedly continued pursuing Sherlock, who, for the first time ever, sprinted away. A rifleman at the outpost shot them with a more high-powered weapon and re-killed, one of them. As soon as one of them went lifeless, the others would single-mindedly stuff their faces full of flesh, just tearing it off limbs and bodies. No shame, no disgust, like they hadn't eaten for days. At this point, the fellow reading Kant piped up. He'd heard of similar stories in his journeys to outposts. Some American soldiers, badly injured and delirious in the sun, told him how they had seen their brothers in arms set upon by filthy mujahideen and ripped apart, alive. Limbs ripped from bodies, heads from necks, and how they would rip the flesh off with their long fingernails, gouging it out or biting it off the bones. They said only fire or high-velocity weapons, not small arms, could stop them. Afghan soldiers, when mortally wounded, prefer to kill themselves than be captured, because they've heard the stories and know the folklore. It is true, they kill themselves. I've seen it. As I became more experienced and hardened to the oddness of Afghanistan, I also heard quite a few of these stories myself, to the point where they don't even worry me anymore. I think I even saw a herd of them rampage through a village. But it's Afghanistan, so they could have been tripping on opiates. The bar I work at is haunted. I don't really believe the stories, but I find them interesting nonetheless. Most of them are pretty bland though. A guy goes to the bathroom and sees a man taking a piss in one of the stalls. Doesn't hear anything, just sees the guy's feet. After finishing up, he glances back at the stall and there's nobody there. Just little things like that. Another one I've heard a lot is when people are starting to get quite drunk, they'll see a nun sitting next to them. She doesn't say anything, but it usually makes them stop drinking. Obviously, since it's a bar, I tend to chalk this up to people being very drunk and open to suggestion. The ghost stories are kinda known. But recently, a barback told me one. This guy was straight-laced, didn't drink at all, and only worked there for a couple of months because he hated the atmosphere. One night after closing, he was helping the bartender clean the bar. Bartender steps out for a smoke. Barback is behind the bar, sanitizing the well, when he gets an eerie feeling and happens to glance up. There's a man sitting opposite him at the bar, staring angrily at him. The barback is looking into this guy's eyes when he fades away. Not disappears, but fades, as though he melted into the background. Again, I don't really believe it, but the guy seemed genuine. Here's another longer one that I believe even less, but it just happened recently, so I'll share it. A fellow bartender was out for a smoke on the sidewalk and a homeless guy asked him for a cigarette. Long story short, the bartender ends up hiring the homeless guy to clean the bathrooms for $10 a day. Homeless guy's name was Derek. He was always a great worker. He'd always be out on the front stoop waiting for me to open up the place. Then he'd clean the bathrooms and mop the floors without saying a word. I'd pay him $10 and he'd leave. But one day, I showed up at the bar and the door was already unlocked. Derek was inside, sitting on the couch waiting for me. I asked him how the hell he got in, and said the place was unlocked before he showed up. Nothing was stolen. The closing bartender insisted he locked the door before he left. Tells the owner, but he just seems happy nobody stole anything. This happens 3 separate times. Since nothing is ever missing, the owner refuses to fix the security cameras. They don't work. The owner is very shitty with money, by the way. Anyway, last week, we're about to get hit with a winter storm, the one that knocked out the power grid here in Texas. It's Saturday, and Derek's waiting out front, shivering. I ask him if he has a place to stay, and he says he does. Okie dokie. Once Monday rolls around, people are losing power all over the place. Since I live basically down the street from the bar, the owner tells me to see if the bar lost power. Thanks a lot, dickhead. I drive by and it looks fine, but I get out and run inside to check on everything. I find the door unlocked and Derek on the couch wrapped in a thick blanket. These blankets are kept in a basement that's always locked. The power is on, so it's warm, but Derek is shaking like he just got in from the cold. I ask him if he's okay and how he got inside. He said he was sleeping on the stoop when some lady opened the door and let him in. He curled up on the couch and felt someone put a blanket on him. Then I showed up. There was nobody else in that bar but us. Like I said, it's hard to believe. Maybe the fucker just figured out a way to unlock the door and was lying to me. But I double-checked the basement that we keep those thick blankets in. It was locked up, tight. Be driving home from a work trip with my coworker Mark. Be late, around 11:30 p.m. The road is leading through a forest. No other cars in sight. Cloudy sky too, so pitch fucking black.
Hey Anon, I need to take a piss. Okay.
Stop the car. He gets out. Walks about 20 meters into the forest. I'm not sure how far since I can't see shit from the car. Hear him trip on some stick or some shit and curse. Laugh at his shy bladder. Next time just take a piss next to the car, you idiot. Didn't really say it out loud though. Mark finishes pissing, walks out of the forest and gets back in the car. Continue driving for 10 minutes. Mark just silently stares out of the window. Suddenly, my cell phone rings. Pull out my cell phone and look at the display to see the name of the caller. It's Mark. Cold sweat immediately floods my entire body. Every muscle clenched. Start shitting myself. Oh god, the thing who got back into the car with me isn't Mark. Put the phone to my ear and accept the call to not look suspicious. For a second, consider just jumping out of the fucking car. Remember I have a switchblade in my pocket. Fuck, should I go for it? Hear voice from the phone. It's Mark's GF. That retard left his phone at home and so she was calling me to make sure the work trip went okay. Close off the stream of soft stool pouring down my underpants. Mark will never know how close he actually came to having a knife in his neck because his coworker is apparently a mentally damaged retard.